Hey there, Christophe from the French Herbal. I love linden. The smell of linden flowers takes me right back to my childhood. And back then, I used to spend my weekends at a great aunt's place in a tiny village in Provence. And we would harvest the linden in July. And well, we didn't need to go very far because the village had some very old trees. And we would pick the flowers and spread them on big sheets to dry, and the scent would take over the whole tiny village house that she had. You could anticipate all the fragrant herbal teas that were coming in the winter months. So linden tea is probably in the top 3 of the most beloved herbal teas in France. Many kids of my generation had to drink some of it at one moment or another because someone would shout, "Won't you just stop moving around and calm down a bit? It's almost bedtime, for God's sake." Yeah, that would be my grandma. So it's a real pleasure to take you on a little tour of one of the gentlest plant in our herbal toolkit. When I use the term linden in this episode, I will be talking about the flowers. At another time, I will tell you about linden inner bark, which is another much appreciated herbal remedy here in France, but all in due time. Before we start, a quick but important reminder: I am not a doctor, a pharmacist, or a licensed healthcare professional. The information that I share in this episode is for educational and informational purpose only, not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any condition, and it does not replace professional medical care. Okay, let's start with a bit of botanical information. Linden is a tree that belongs to the Malvaceae family. Yeah, the same family as common mallow and marshmallow. That tells us a thing or two regarding constituents and properties. Yep, it will contain mucilages and it will be demulcent. Linden is super common in France. You find the tree in village squares and along the roadsides. Different type of lindens are used for harvesting. We have the large-leaved linden, Tilia platyphilus. We have the small-leaved linden, which is Tilia cordata. We have the common linden, which is a hybrid, Tilia ex europea. In the US, you have American basswood, which is Tilia americana. We have silver linden, Tilia tomentosa, sometimes used. The one you'll usually see at lower altitude in France is the small-leaved variety, and higher up you'll generally find the large-leaved one. The one you spot in gardens, in parks, in village squares is often the hybrid variety, which is a mix of the large and the small-leaved types, okay? Well, they're all good to pick. Some people even say that the hybrid smells better than others, and others disagree. Where, you know, if it looks like linden flowers and it has the sweet honey-like scent of linden flowers, it's probably good to go in your cup. However, please make sure you're picking the right species, because in my years of practice, sometimes I've been unpleasantly surprised by the mistakes and confusion people make when they pick, right? They think they're picking a certain herb and they're picking another, and as you know, mistakes can be fatal, right? So for linden though, granted, the risk of confusion is relatively small. Linden trees grow very slowly and they can live a very long time. You know, you can find some trees that are over 1,000 years old. In some French villages, we still have what we call Sully's linden. Sully was Henry IV minister, Henri IV, and he had them planted back in 1598. So those trees are at least 400 years old, right? The parts used are the flowers with the bracts. So it looks like a leaf with a tiny stem and a few flowers attached, right? That is, if you pick and dry it yourself, right? If you buy from a store, chances are it will be crushed, so you won't recognize what I'm describing here. If you just use the flowers without the bracts, the tea will be even more aromatic. And some pickers do this, right? They remove the bracts. Now, this is quite uncommon, and you won't find just the tiny flowers from your favorite herb store. You will find flowers plus the bract, and that is pretty standard, and that's good enough, right? And from now on, I will just use the term flowers. The ideal time for picking is when most of the flowers are fully open. Some of them will still be closed, and that's fine. And the ideal flowering period will last just for a few days, and at that moment the smell will be almost intoxicating for the most aromatic of trees, right? Older generations, like my grandparents, they only picked the most aromatic of lindens, and they also checked that the linden could keep their aroma when dried throughout the winter, which depended on the species. You know, for instance, some old folks said that the hybrid Tilia X Europea was known to be very fragrant but more unstable and less predictable when you dry it than other species. For drying, you spread the flowers on drying racks in a dry, well-ventilated room out of direct sunlight, and they should be dry in 3 to 4 days usually. Then you store them in paper bags away from moisture, and they will stay fragrant for several months if you keep them right. In terms of constituents, we have lots of flavonoids, making linden antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. Lots of mucilages, about 10% of dry weight, which is not surprising for a plant in the mallow family. So it's very soothing to the digestive tract. We have an essential oil responsible for its fragrance, mostly composed of monoterpenes like linalool, geraniol, eucalyptol. We have some condensed tannins that we call proanthocyanidins, about 2% of dry weight. We have phenolic acids like chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, coumaric acid, very antioxidant. The energetics, cooling and moistening. Linden flowers make a sweet tasting, demulcent, very pleasant tea. Okay, let's talk about properties and indications. First of all, linden calms down hot tempers, what we may call hyperexcitability, in both kids and adults. You know that state where someone just can't sit still, constantly moving, fidgeting, jumping up from the table, from the chairs. Basically, if you have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a state of nervous tension, very electric. And some adults get this way too, right? Sometimes when they're overloaded with ideas and projects, and sometimes we call this positive stress, you know, the kind of stress that comes with a lot of motor energy, making it hard to wait until tomorrow to get started on something, right? Entrepreneurs often deal with this kind of a brain on fire state. So sure, it's positive stress, but it's just as disruptive. You know, too much adrenaline, too much cortisol at the wrong moment of the day, restless sleep, and all the metabolic mess that comes with it, right? So we're really talking about a state of nervous excess here, usually accompanied by heat in the sense of movement, agitation. And you know, technically, heat is generated by molecular agitation. So don't confuse this state with nervous exhaustion, which is more of a crash, empty state, feeling depressed, empty, having no drive, you know, or a lack of nervous tone, you know, the opposite of the tension we're discussing here. Although linden also, you know, it feels kind of nourishing to the nervous system, I think due to this sweet, reassuring effect that wraps you up in a comfortable herbal blanket. But that's not the traditional indication. Let me quote François-Joseph Cazin, one of our great herbal docs of the 1800s. He said, "Linden always produces a sense of well-being resulting from the sedation of the nervous system." Sedation, the reduction of agitation. Sometimes the person suffers from heart palpitation due to the excitement. And as we'll see later, linden is great for the cardiovascular system because it kind of cools it down, right? For all these situations, you can drink linden tea twice a day, 3 times a day, and use this as an excuse to chill out, right? There's nothing wrong with sitting down for 10 minutes and flipping through a good book. If you can't remember the last time you allowed yourself such a luxury, and I plead guilty here, then linden is definitely for you. And if the boss sees you in the break room with a teapot full of linden and gives you the stare, well, guess who needs a cup of linden? For kids, try a tea at the end of the day, after the shower or bath, to start getting them ready for bed. Not too close to bedtime though, to avoid any middle of the night bathroom accident. A little honey goes a long way here to make the tea even sweeter. There's a beautiful, almost poetic quote from Henri Leclerc, an amazing practitioner of the 1900s, and I'm going to rephrase it here in a more modern form. You know, he says something like, whether it's the high-powered woman whose frantic lifestyle leaves her feeling anxious and frayed, or the worker who has a demanding physical job and returns home completely exhausted and aching from a long day, or the student whose late night study session leads to chronic headaches, everyone finds comfort in this fragrant tea, right? It is appreciated not only for its elegant aroma and delicate taste, but also for its remarkable power to restore balance. I'll put the original quote on my website, translated by yours truly, just for the poetic language of Leclerc. So you see, linden isn't just for kids, it works for adults too. No matter your job or social status, linden isn't picky, it will adapt. When it comes to mixing with other plants, I think it goes great with orange blossom, really. A pinch of linden and 3 or 4 orange blossoms in a cup makes a fabulous tea. It also pairs well with hawthorn, flowering tops, you know, keeping things floral and gentle. Maybe a bit of rose petals too. Jean Valnet, another one of our renowned French docs, recommends using linden flowers in a bath for children's convulsion and nervous exhaustion. You know, a relaxing soak, if you will. Usually, if you brew a strong infusion, a strong tea in a big pot, using maybe 2 to 3 handfuls of linden flowers, then you pour it into the bath water. It will do the job. A quick pause to let you know that you can grab my free ebook on preparing herbal teas for the 4 seasons. It's full of simple recipes and blends you can make with herbs you can buy or even grow almost anywhere. The link is right below this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Now, a very important side note, I don't know if you knew this, but for a small number of people, linden can actually be stimulating. Here in France, some people suggest that a very short infusion, say a couple of minutes, no more, will solve the problem, and the longer it steeps, the more it excites. Personally, I just say that if linden revs you up, well, it's not for you. There are plenty of other plants that can help you relax. Although, I reassure you, for most people, linden should be calming indeed. Okay, let's talk about fevers now. We mentioned the heat state earlier. Well, it turns out that linden is an excellent diaphoretic, right up there with 2 other herbs that I love, elderflower, Sambucus nigra, and yarrow, Achillea millefolium. A diaphoretic plant helps the pores of the skin open up so you can sweat more easily, right? Releasing fluid is a way to release heat. And sweating is necessary for that radiator effect when you have a fever. So linden is indeed a great plant to support a fever, and it helps the body to regulate its temperature. In this case, the tea should be drunk hot at regular intervals throughout the day. Rudolf Weiss, a very famous German herbalist and doctor, explains that even if linden doesn't make the person sweat, it will still bring a general boost to the immune system. That's interesting. Let's now move on to the cardiovascular health. Linden is traditionally used to help with high blood pressure when it's linked to nervous tension, right? And this is different from what we call essential hypertension, which is often seen as a kidney regulation issue, which usually calls for diuretics. Here, we're talking about blood pressure that fluctuates and spikes with stress, right? In that case, it will mix well with hawthorn again, with olive leaf, with passion flower leaf. Linden has been used in French practice for atherosclerosis, the buildup of arterial plaque. Valnet says that it works on the tendency of the blood to be hyperviscous and to coagulate a little too quickly. So the blood is thick and reactive, if you will. And basically, linden helps the blood to move more smoothly, and it lowers the risk of blockage. I'll let Leclerc have the final word again here. He says, through many clinical observations, backed by blood tests, I have concluded that linden is truly effective in atherosclerosis for addressing what I call triple blood dyscrasia: high red blood cell count, high viscosity, and high potential to coagulate. It will make the blood more fluid, more ductile, and preventing it from pooling in the vessels or sticking to the wall. Wow, that's very powerful. Okay, let's move on to the digestive tract. Cazin gives us a little lesson here on using mucilaginous plants versus astringent ones for diarrhea. He says, I cannot help but point out that many chronic diarrheas for which astringents are used to no avail will give way to the persistent use of mucilaginous plants. This is because these issues are often due to an irritation of the mucous membrane, which astringents don't always fix. That's a very interesting point from a very experienced practitioner, right? Why do I say that? Because usually beginning herbalists will usually grab an astringent herb for any kind of diarrhea. Well, how about soothing that irritation instead with mucilage, instead of grabbing astringents for the mucous membrane? Generally speaking, whenever there is inflammation of the digestive mucosa, it could be esophagus, stomach, intestinal tract, linden is a good call. It's definitely not as thick and slimy as marshmallow, but it will do the trick. Maybe you don't have any marshmallow on hand. Just use a strong infusion of linden here. In terms of preparations, the simplest form is what we call the infusion in France, which is a tea of the flowers. 15 to 30 grams of dried herb per liter of water, which is about half an ounce to an ounce of the dried plant per quart. 20 grams is a very good middle ground here. And if you don't want to use a scale, a good tablespoon of the cut and sifted linden, or just a good pinch, right? Now the important part, make sure it's quite tasty. If not, you add a little more. You let it steep in a sealed jar or covered cup for 10 minutes, and you use 2 to 4 cups a day. You can also use the tincture of the fresh or dried flowers. If you use the fresh plant, use the 1:2 ratio, meaning 200 milliliter of 80% alcohol for each 100 gram of fresh plant. And for you American folks, it's 160 proof alcohol. All of this is on my website in the article associated with this episode, so you don't need to write this down. If you use the dried plant, you use the 1/5 ratio, meaning 500 milliliter of 40% alcohol, or 80 proof in the US, for each 100 gram of dried plant. In terms of quantities to use of the fresh or dried plant tincture, I would use 2.5 to 5 milliliters up to 3 times a day. In terms of contraindications and precautions, not much to worry about really, except for the fact that once in a while, as explained, it ends up being exciting instead of calming. But that's the way it goes with plants, right? They're complex and they have a way to surprise us. That's it for Linden. To me, it's my summers in this tiny village of Provence with my great aunts and my grandparents. And just thinking of it, I melt like marshmallow. So next time the world feels a little too electric, brew yourself a nice little cup, take a deep breath and let it work its magic. That's it for this episode. Thanks for being here. I will see you very soon on the French Herbal.